those, that's my understanding. So this year in the parks budget, we've actually allocated for some pre-emergence. So from early spring, we'll be doing some pre-emergence in those beds. And then we're gonna put all of those beds on at least a 3 times a year close monitoring. They should be monitored at least once a week as we visit all the parks. But we're going to make sure that at least 3 times a year, once in the spring, once in the summer, once in the fall, all of those parks get a good detailed walkthrough and inspection to address the plants and the weeds that are coming up in there. So we're gonna try to address that with the pre-emergence, the post-emergence after spring comes up if we have to. If it's just small areas where we've got weeds coming up, then hand folding and mulching is how we're going to basically handle those. I kind of like to use the post-emergence on an as-need or emergency kind of basis.
As little as possible, right?
Yeah, as little as possible, but once you get to a point where they're out of control, and things like buckthorn, they really do kind of need that application to them. And just some of the stuff that we're looking at.
So will we use the pre-emergence in all landscape beds? I realize not the natural areas, but all the landscape.
In the landscape bed, so around
Okay.
the signs, those
Okay.
little mulch areas where we don't have perennials and stuff coming
Yeah.
out. So kind of see if we can tackle that a little bit before it gets out of control.
Yes, I think that's a great one.
Yeah, before it gets so bad. So part
I
of
don't know
this-
if everybody understands what a pre-emergent is.
Yeah.
Can I explain, just give them a quick detail of
Pre-emergent?
Yeah, just give them a quick.
It's an application, it's an herbicide that you put down, basically you pull the mulch back a little bit, you put the herbicide down in early spring before the plants start to come up. So a pre-emergent does not kill plants once they come through the surface.
It actually
They kill
stops
them
the
as
seed,
they-
stops the seed from actually germinating.
Yes, so pull the mulch back, put the pre-emergent down, put the mulch back on top, and that helps to keep those seeds from germinating and actually popping through. It doesn't do anything to a plant that's already come through. That's where you have to go with the post-emergent if you're gonna work on that aspect. So a couple of the plants that we deal with, one, it was brought up the other day about the noxious weeds. Illinois does have the noxious weed law. That basically requires that if you have noxious weeds, you have to remove those weeds. It's a pretty short list, but it's also a pretty difficult list to hit, particularly the thistle. That's a tough one. But also, it's not a law.
I don't think we're growing it.
It's not a law, but there is the Illinois Exotic Weed Act. And while that doesn't require that you remove those particular plants, they are on the state's list of plants not to be sold, not to be bought, not to be planted, not to be brought into the state. And the reason for that is the plants that are on this list are incredibly invasive. And those are the other plants that we try to tackle. So your buckthorns, your teasels, honeysuckle, that kind of stuff. So those are just an overview of some of the other plants that we're trying to keep under control.
What about Phragmites?
I don't see Phragmites on there. We try to keep Phragmites under control.
There's that park that we have that's at Furniture Road and Peak Farm.
The
North-
Oaks.
Yeah, that one. That whole detention pond, I think now is basically cattails and Phragmites.
That's one I know in the past, that there's been a published already, because the pond itself. Yeah, exactly. To where we don't even really mow that property for the most part. We mow around the property probably on a non-regular basis, so maybe semi-annually. It's mowed on the outskirts, but we haven't done much. We haven't even done much in pond maintenance at that point, just because of the location and the generality of the users. That's not a heavily used pond, I guess, but you know, that is one that I think we've seen quite an encroachment beyond.
To fill in either, because it'll lose its purpose.
The other one we're worried about this year is, I'm probably gonna call it incorrectly, Riverview, the bridge to nowhere. That pond is starting to fill in pretty badly too, with the Phragmites and the cattails actually getting out of control. So it is, when we get to the budget for next year, that's one of the ponds that is on the list, or that's one of the areas that's on the list for maintenance next year. Any questions?
None of this would hurt the milk thistle for the butterflies? Yes. Thank you. Next on the agenda.
I'm sorry, can we get a copy of that?
Oh, yes.
That, that will actually be in your weekly update.
Oh,
All the presentations you've seen tonight will be in
all
your
right,
weekly update.
all right.
Next is new business, the corporate and recreation fund presentation.
As we move towards the end of our shortened fiscal year of 2015A, we're starting to plan for fiscal year 2016, which will be a full fiscal year. As we adjusted our fiscal cycle, now we will be on a January 1 to December 31st cycle, starting this upcoming budget. Like last year, one of the things I like to do is give you a presentation of Corp and Rec, a little bit of an overview, some of the general highlights of the fund, to prepare you a little bit more, because these are our two largest funds. One of the things you do have in your binder currently is a full budget detail of both the corporate and rec fund as they'll be presented. These are drafts right now, so these still could possibly be altered as we move forward, but this just gives you what we're working on for the draft right now. So looking at our funds, just as a quick overview, you have your general fund. And I'm going to grab a sheet. I don't want to keep flipping backwards. Sorry. Our general fund, we primarily use administratively for maintenance, parks, and other financial resources that doesn't have a special fund. Pretty much your general fund can, or your corporate fund, can operate pretty much anything within your park district structure. We're also presenting a special revenue fund tonight, our recreation fund, that is here for the purpose of recreation. And one of our goals when we write our budgets is to have a balanced budget. So basically what that means, actually it means a budget that there's neither a deficit nor a surplus, but more traditionally, it's a budget that has no deficit, but could possibly have a budget surplus. As you heard earlier when we had our audit presentation, our surpluses that we see in our funds at the end of the year are what we move into capital to help us sustain further down the road. An overview of our fund in fiscal 2015 as audited, the one you saw tonight, 87% of our revenue was constituted between the two funds we're showing you tonight. 88% of our expenditures comes out of these two funds. As we look forward to 2016, we're looking at these two funds to constitute about $5,659,248 of our operating expenses. When you look at the revenue breakout, 71% of our fund, or our revenue from this fund, or from these two funds, comes from taxes. So we are heavily dependent upon our tax revenue. As we move forward, we budgeted this down a little. This is to these two funds, 71%. When we throw in the other funds, that when we see the entire budget, will be closer to 75 or 76%. The way we need to eradicate and try to get lower to more of a 65 to 45%, or 65% based on funds, is we are looking for new ways to continuously, we gotta grow our revenue. It's not cut the expenditures, it's growing revenue. So basically, to get to a 65%, we need to start looking for means to grow our revenue by almost $750,000. When we look at our breakout of the expenses of these two funds, 62% of this comes from the main operation of our district. Our salaries and what comes with salaries, the health benefits. So you see 40% of our total operation is full-time salaries. So when you look at some of it, contingency after those, or you got recreation operations, that's a lot of the expenses, materials, etc. That's where we see most of our stuff come out. Most of our ancillary expenses come out besides these two. Our maintenance operations is only 3% when we look at it in the overall picture. Administrative operations 4%, utilities 3%. The question center accounts for 5% of our expenses. So it's some interesting information as you look at the overall budget, where our money is going, based out on what we have budgeted currently.
Do we know if that's similar to what other park districts run at?
In one aspect, I can
Our
tell you,
size.
I can tell you the one thing that is pretty much consistent in every park district: 50 to 60% of your operating budget is constituted by salaries and benefits. That is pretty much a traditional standpoint. Now, obviously, we're a little different in some of our other aspects, where we have the equestrian center, and when we look at when I call it fluctuates in our whole operating system, that's something that might just be rolled into recreation operations. So if you roll equestrian center and the Ottawa Street pool, you're actually looking at recreation operations is closer to 20% of the rest of our operation costs. One of the things I did just to see, as we talked about full-time salaries being 40% of the recreation and corporate budgets, I just did a yearly comparison and showed where they fall in the millions. Now, one of the things you'll see as you look through the numbers here is you'll see fluctuations. This somewhat has to do with how we reallocated the money from where it was previously. And I'll use an example. When we move into fiscal year 2016, you'll see that we go up in Parks Administration up to $472,000 from a previous year of $244,000. We've moved all park administration into one area of the account. Instead of having them broken out in different areas, we're trying through the guidance of the Finance and Liability Committee is put like things together, and we stayed with that trend. So this not only has in it 2 extra supervisors, 1 extra division manager, and also a planner in there. So that's one of the increases here. In previous years, they would have been located, like last year, they were all located right here. So you see a decrease between these 2 funds, but an increase between these 2 funds just by where we allocated it. Otherwise, the only thing you look at otherwise is we pretty much stay on a consistent trend here, and besides the jump right here, we stayed on a consistent trend. And this was some variance a little bit in between these 2 years. We've been on a consistent trend. This moved up consistently, and then these 2 years are pretty consistent, moving up. So just give you an idea of how our salaries break out. So when you're looking at the numbers, you know how we're lumping them together. At this point, I'm going to have each director present their own area. So to start with, I'm going to have Director Nugent to present the corporate area.
So the corporate fund, there are 2 departments. The first department is administration. And if you look on your budget draft, that's Fund 01, the first 2 digits, and the Department 01 signifies administration. So some of the highlights in the corporate fund in the administration department. We do have the 2 farm leases at Ridge Road and then also at the Klaus Stevens property. Last year, those were bid out, and those are for 3-year leases, so those are still the same. The field usage and the allocation policy, those are reflected in the income line items for athletic field user fees and usage fees. Those have been established with the affiliate agreements. Under information technology, we have budgeted $7,000 for 1 server replacement. Our utility expenses have decreased on the budget side. We decreased water budget by $12,000 due to usages of splash pad. We have decreased the hours there, and then also our Parks Department changed the flow of the water so that our usage is down at the splash pad. And then the propane tanks that we have, that is also reduced $10,000. We renegotiated those rates to a lower rate. Contingency in all our funds is generally recommended to be between 5 and 10% annually. We're looking at about $149,000 at this point for the contingency in our corporate fund. Employee insurance, that was last year locked in with Prudema for a 3-year contract. That's our health, dental, life, and employee assistance program. We did do some reallocation from the recreation fund to corporate. The executive assistant position was previously split between those 2 funds. Now that's fully in the corporate fund. The HR generalist was fully in the recreation fund last year. That's now split between the 2 funds. And then also our barn hand over at the equestrian center, he is now lumped into the park maintenance salary. So he's no longer in the recreation fund. We did not budget for our unemployment fund and our audit fund this year, consistent with our tax levy. Those are now established as individual line items within the corporate fund. And then we are planning a 50th anniversary celebration. So there are items in the recreation budget and then also in the corporate budget to reflect those estimated expenses relating to that celebration. And then throughout our budget, there's a raise pool of 2.5%. 1% is a cost of living, and 1.5% is a merit based on evaluation. So for example, how that works is if you turn to page 2, under administration, salaries and wages, where it says wage increase and there's $6,000 budgeted, that's just a pool of 2.5% on all of those administrative salaries. So those are distributed based on merit and cost of living. Otherwise, everything else is pretty much consistent. Are there any questions regarding the corporate administration department? Yes.
I have a question about,
Sure.
you said the unemployment is now a line item on the corporate budget.
Yes.
I noticed that it was in our the report that have budgeted $500 for 2016, and I saw that our last figures were in like the 30,000.
Right. With our unemployment, we are a reimbursable employer, whereas a lot of businesses in Illinois, they pay in a certain percentage rate for unemployment insurance. Government agencies have the option to become a reimbursable employer, so we pay the claims as they come in. With unemployment, we never know if we're gonna get claims for a year or not get claims, so we just put $500 in there as a placeholder, and we can always transfer money from that contingency to the unemployment line item if we do get any claims.
On the 50th anniversary, what is our total anticipated budget for the 50th?
I believe altogether it comes out to about $8,000 between corp rec and some extra marketing materials.
Okay, and we're not expecting any income from that, right? So
Not currently.
it's just a cost.
Currently, yes.
So where are we getting that money?
We budget, it's part of our tax allocation. We just want to, we're using it as part of our awareness and using it as part of our marketing aspect.
Okay, so that some of it's coming from what would have been our marketing budget last year, or what's, okay.
Portions of it, or just on other things.
So a
that-
little bit from here, a little bit from there kind of thing.
Yes, we
So-
put it in as a stakeholder, we put it as a place marker as we went through, and then as we balanced out the budget to determine if it, we started out with a certain number, and that was, and then what we're gonna do is gonna be contingent upon what our final number came up to be.
Okay,
We did try to keep it pretty cost effective, just a lot of it is in,
well, I think it's
park
something that's
beautification.
really important for our marketing, and I don't mean to imply that I don't see the value of it, I really do. I just was curious how we were
we
gonna.
kind of incorporated it partially, when Cheryl will talk about this briefly, in the special event aspect too though. So whereas it's gonna be some of the free event that we put back towards the community, so it comes out of that area as well a little bit. You know?
Any scheduled special events for next year in regards to the 50th anniversary?
We are looking at two. We're looking at,
that justify some of the revenues, expenditures?
to justify
In
expenditures.
regards to costs and so forth, in regards to.
We don't have revenues based on them, we have expenditures based on them, but we're looking at doing a movie, an evening throwback movie at Renwick, which would then go back to the commissioners' talk about moving it, not always having it at Settlers Park. And then also we are looking at doing just a general celebration at Village Green in the middle of June.
And you have budgeted $2,600 for the 50th anniversary in total, or?
No, it's about 8,000.
Oh, okay.
You see $2,600 in the recreation fund.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to hear what it was total, because it's.
It's broken out.
It's broken out.
It's broken out into a number of different places.
And that, when we finalized this, one of the things I had stated when we were putting together the 50th anniversary agenda, we'll give that presentation of the scheduled events in anticipation. Like some of it is park beautification. We're looking at doing 2 of our plant beds in vegetation that's yellow based, so that it will be up here all year long to go that route. Some of it is just some identification signage at some of our parks. Other aspects of it is like a birthday celebration on the day the park would actually be 50 years old. At this point, then we'll move to the parks and planning aspect of the corporate budget, and Director Brooks Lopez will handle that.
Under the equipment for parks and supplies, that includes, the basic number on that includes all of our equipment, maintenance, in-house items, so your filters, your oils and stuff like that. In addition to that, this year we're adding into 2 tank sprayers to be put on the back of, I believe it's going to be Brett and Pete's truck, so we'll have 2 herbicide tank sprayers. A plant bed edger, so that we can get a little bit better with our edging in our parks and those plant beds that we do have. We're also adding a core aerator too to kind of help us with the turf maintenance. So those are some of the key items on that one. In the natural area management, we talked about it a little bit in the previous presentation. Under this, we have some burns. We do have some herbicide applications that we'll be doing this year. And a portion of this also is we're continuing to try to tackle the EAV issue that we've had here in Plainfield. And we've been working together, Jane and I, to come up with a plan on how best to tackle the number of dead trees that we have here in the park district. So this year, we removed trees in our key parks. So Village Green, let's see, where did we? Village Green, Boy Scout Park, Renwick, Staff will be going to Renwick Park to remove, I don't know if you've been there recently, but you'll notice every single tree in the parking lot at Renwick is dead. So staff will be going later this fall to do the removals there. The budget for replacing those trees is coming out of the 2016. So in spring and fall of next year, I'll be going back into those parks and replanting those trees. Not at a one-to-one ratio. It kind of depends on where we're taking them out, how many we need to put back in. Next year, in 2016, park staff will be removing the remainder of the trees on the north end of town. So those other parks that were not key parks that we didn't get to this year, trying to think of, so the ponds would be one. I think I've got 2 dead trees over at the ponds, Heritage Meadows, that kind of stuff. We'll be going into those parks, doing the removals of those trees in the fall. In 2017, I'll be budgeting for replacement. So we're kind of trying to do it systematically for our guys in the same area of town. Tackle the trees, get them out, and then the following year do replacements. And the year after that, we'll go into the southeast quadrant and the southwest quadrant. Our ash level seems to be a little bit higher in the north half, the south half of town than the north half of town. Just the way the development's going. In the south half, it's too loud.
The storm is drowning you out.
But that's the general idea for the EAD. We've just kind of been responding to it as people have called or as we've seen some dead trees, but that hasn't led to kind of a comprehensive attack of the problem. So we're trying to be a little bit more aggressive with it over the next couple of years to tackle that. Fuel for vehicles, that's always a giant line item that comes in there. That's based on 3-year average. So we took the 12, 13, 13, 14, 14, 15 numbers. We didn't use 15 because it was a half year. The average of that was roughly $95,000. So we're requesting $100,000 this year, just to cover us from the overruns on that. And then playground mulch is another piece that's showing up in here this year. We're estimating to redo about 30 playgrounds, top dresser mulch, bring them back up, get them back up and running. And then staffing. Any questions?
Then we'll move on to the final, and then we'll move on to the recreation budget at this point, which Director Chrisman will present.
One of the first things I would like to do is thank Maureen, Shelley, the recreation staff, as well as Carla for putting this all together, because the recreation budget is a key source of revenue for the district, so it takes a lot of people to make sure that everything is in order and putting it together, and the finance staff has been wonderful to work with. The contingency in the rec fund is sent for 5 to 10% of the annual budget, as Maureen had stated before. In the rec fund, that's at $120,000 anticipated this year. Some of the employee budget allocation revisions, certain staff members were budgeted within their program areas, such as the equestrian center manager was budgeted under equestrian center lines and not put with the administrative and salary line items. Same as with 2 of the supervisors. So those numbers have been moved into the salary areas under administration. So those are not within the program budgets themselves anymore. The salaries and benefits for the recreation fund make up 35% of the recreation budget. The inclusion of the Ottawa Street Pool within the recreation fund was done for the first time in fiscal year 15A, and it was a shortened year. So this will be the first year that the recreation fund will fully have the Ottawa Street Pool budget in it for a whole year, which is why you see zeros when you look through. There are no pre-existing numbers, because that was based off of Ottawa Street Pool having its own fund prior to that. The facility expenses, including the repainting of Ottawa Street Pool, is included in this budget, and that's needed for routine maintenance as well as the aesthetics of the pool. Some of that will be done in-house. So we were able to save some money on those costs thanks to the maintenance department and looking at those funds. The 50th anniversary celebration allocation is also, as we've talked about, within this fund. The budgeted raised pool is the same as in the corporate. And I thought it was interesting to point out that the recreation fund is 44% funded by taxes and 53% funded by programming. 3% of the income comes from the various sources, including fundraising, advertising, miscellaneous income, and some reimbursements that are received. That being said, one of the things that we are striving to do for the future is to increase the portion of the budget that is funded by the recreation programming. We're kind of looking at this as our baseline, and that needs to increase substantially in the next years. And if we can increase it by the end of this year based on our income and expenses, that is something that we hope to do. If you go to the programming breakout, the early childhood, you can see the revenue and expenses. One thing I do want to note, Great Adventures is included in the early childhood area, and in the expenses for Great Adventures, as you can see, the program runs at a loss, but $110,022 is the HPC yearly rent for 2016. So that is a substantial cost to the recreation fund to have that facility and have that rent in place. It does cause that program to be subsidized. In the youth teen area, I did break out day camp and dance. Day camp, as you saw a couple months ago, is a very good program. That program does show a profit for us, as well as dance is one of our more successful programs. That program meets its 37% plus. It's one of our larger programs, and it's also one of our most visible programs, I think, in the community at times. Athletics, I took that together and I broke out basketball, which is our in-house basketball league. And that program has been very successful, and we have seen steady growth within that program, and it's now at a point where it's maintaining its numbers because we can't grow it too much more based on the space that we have available within the Plainfield schools, but we are working very closely with the Plainfield schools to ensure that we have that space and working towards being able to grow that program more. The active adult programming, you heard the presentation on this evening. Based on the way the revenue policy is set up, the active adult programming was set to make a 12%. And as you can see, we have about 12,000, 13,000 profit within the fitness area alone for the active adult programming. That does include all of the fitness for adults. I did take that, not just the programming that occurs in this building, but the fitness programming that occurs in our streams, as well as our rec admin center as well. Special events is an area where the district does take a loss. The patriotic picnic alone, within that line item, loses just over $18,000, almost $19,000. Some of the things that are budgeted as expenses this year under special events are one-time purchases. There's probably about $11,000 of one-time purchases put within the special events line item. So the hope is that we can take that line item and expand the revenue within it. It's necessary to make these things continue. I also took them and broke them out in graph form because sometimes that's a little easier for people to see it in different manners, and that's the revenue and expenses. When you look at that, you can see early childhood has been and remains one of the largest things that we as a district have to offer. I hope to see the active adult programming growing as we see that population segment within our district increasing as well. I then took out this and looked at some of the facility breakout. Now the facilities are utilized for programs as well. This does not take into account the program overhead. However, it does show all of the expenses for the facilities. So the income from the programs does offset some of those expenses, but the revenue that is strictly facility-based are rental-only numbers. We have not gone through a full year of our rental policy, so facility manager Dunphy was very conservative. He did not want to overproject these numbers by any means. So this is a number that we really do hope to exceed, that the revenue for rentals within the Township Community Center would be based on $7,200. But when we look at the expenses for each of the Community Center as well as the Heritage Center, those numbers are based on utilities, everything that goes into the building operations, as well as the staffing that's also in these buildings. Whether it's here for programs, here for rentals, there needs to be a front desk person at the facilities. The special revenue facilities are Normantown as well as Ottawa Street Pool. As you look at Normantown Equestrian Center, you can see that our revenue is well exceeding our expenses. When you look at the administration side of things, once again, that includes all the general expenses. What the revenue includes there is solely the apartments and the storage units that are in the back. That has been a consistent number, and we see and do hope that that number will maintain. When we look at special events, lessons, boarding, and tax shop, all of them do meet the goals that we have for exceeding and increasing our revenues. Overall, this facility shows about an $80,000 profit